to the WWP EN webinar, If Pornography is Sex Education, What Does It Teach? My name is Anna Mackenzie and I am the WWP EN Communication Manager. I will give you a brief introduction to some technical things before handing over to Natalia and Meghan, whom you can already see in the video on the left-hand side. The webinar is scheduled from 3 to 4 p.m. Central European Time, also depending on how long the Q&A session at the end of the presentation is. As you noticed by now, probably the webinar is set to listen only, so we cannot hear or see any of the participants. There's a chat at the bottom left-hand side of the window, which can be used to ask questions at the end of the presentation or for interaction with the moderators during the webinar, for example, when they ask questions or ask for some input. Natalia and Meghan will read out any questions that you have. Please don't worry about your English when writing in the chat. Many of us are not native speakers, and we would love for everybody to participate. Please quit Skype and, if possible, any other programs that are using the internet, so you have the best internet connection possible. If there are any other issues with the webinar, go to the attendee list on the left-hand side and click on WWP EN. It will then be possible to start a private chat, and we will try to do anything possible to resolve the issues you're having. At the end of the presentation, there will be a short poll of about 4 questions. We would be very thankful if you could take the couple of minutes it will take to answer them. So thank you very much and for joining us today, and enjoy the presentation with Natalia and Meghan.
Thank you very much, Anna. And thank you, WWP, for giving us this opportunity to talk about pornography with you today. My name is Natalia Batenkova, and I'm a chief coordinator at Unizon. Before we start the presentation, I would like to encourage you to ask questions, share your thoughts, share your reflections on what we will be talking about, and you can do it either at the end of the presentation when we have a Q&A session, or you can do it in the main chat throughout the whole presentation. And we will try to address your questions and comments and reflections during the presentation as much as we can. So let's get started. As I said, I am from Unizon, which is the national umbrella organization for women's shelters, young women and youth empowerment centers, and other support services. And we're getting bigger and bigger now. We're over 140 member organizations. And for those of you who haven't heard that much about Unizon, I can just tell you that our member organizations are located pretty much everywhere in Sweden. You can see it on the map. And our vision is the gender equal society free from violence. And in order to reach this gender equal society free from violence, we need to work holistically. And as you see here on this little drawing, we have different kinds of activities and different kinds of work that go together in order to have this holistic approach to our work. So our member organizations work with giving protection and support to victims of men's violence. So it's women and children subjected to men's violence. Both Unizon as an umbrella organization and our members work actively with advocacy. Member organizations work with advocacy level, and as a national association work on the more general level, on the state level, you can say, and we do everything to represent our member organizations organizations and to make their voices. And last but not least, that is actually both for Unizon and the organization and for our members. Pornography, and we will be talking a little about it. Great, thanks, Natalia. So my name's Meghan Donevan, and I work at an organization called Talita. So we're a nonprofit organization that was initially started in Sweden in 2004, and we offer both acute and long-term support to women who've been exploited in prostitution, pornography, or human trafficking for sexual purposes. So since our beginning in 2004, we've slowly grown, and now we're based in both Stockholm and Gothenburg in Sweden. And even a few years ago, clients that we supported actually returned to Mongolia, where she came from, and started a Talita there. And they're actually the only organization in Mongolia who are able to offer support services to children who are being exploited in sexual exploitation. And then actually just this past year, we developed a fantastic collaboration with a local organization in Romania. So through our collaboration, we're able to offer this long-term support. And then we also work on things like prevention and have outreach, etc. And then we're a very proud member of CAP International, so that stands for the Coalition for the Abolition of Prostitution. And we have 23 different members all throughout the world who each are frontline organizations working directly with victims of prostitution and sexual exploitation. Yes. And basically, what does Talita, what do we offer? What is our program? So through many years of working with victims of sexual exploitation, my colleagues who are the founders of Sweden have basically created this program, this long-term program that helps to address all of the women's and girls' needs. So this program consists of safe housing. We see how important it is to, for women to be able to actually get away from perpetrators and actually be in a safe space. But there's also other needs like trauma therapy. We see that trauma is both a precondition and consequence of prostitution. So even women who initially we meet who say, no, I want to be in prostitution, it's my choice. As we get to know them, they start to open up about the different traumas that have really affected their lives, actually being a huge cause in kind of leading them into prostitution. So trauma therapy is super crucial. We also have psychoeducation, so that's in a group setting where women learn things. We address topics like what is a healthy relationship, what is flashbacks, how can we deal with, oh, you start, the light just went out, 1 sec, oh, that's exciting. 1 second, there we go, sorry. So psychoeducation, and then we also planning for the future. We've seen how important it is to actually sit down once a week with each of these women. They obviously are coming from a diversity of different backgrounds, and so each of them have very specific needs. So it's a very individualized approach also to the women's situation. We plan, okay, what are the next steps for her, say, to become integrated in Swedish society, to study, to find a job, to learn Swedish, etc. And then finally, after this 1-year program, it's 1 year long, eventually the goal is then to transition into independent living. So we have several transition apartments where they can live for an additional year. And then the goal is always then studies or work. And we have a lot of collaboration with different organizations and different authorities in order to facilitate this integration into society. So that's our program, and yes. And if you have any questions, of course, you can type it in. So now we'll start talking about pornography, and before we start, I just want to thank WWP again because of the interest to the topic of pornography that WWP as a network shows throughout the years, and Unizon, as a member of WWP, always wanted to talk more about the preventive work and the role of pornography in this work. So thank you very much. So we are thinking about what would be a good start of the presentation, and since it's Christmas coming, we would like to Here is some Christmas greetings. I hope it works. Yes. So here we got a Christmas greetings from Pornhub, which is one of the biggest pornography sites right now. And we would like to hear from you to have spontaneous reactions, some kind of thoughts on what you just so to share them with us. So what we see, what we see here is practically the normalization of pornography and some kind of even an attempt to romanticize it. And it really became a kind of normal part of our life. As you can see here, there is a huge billboard that was placed practically in the middle of New York a couple of years ago by Pornhub that is just saying us that all we need is hands. And that is again the way it lies the pornography consumption, the way to say that there is nothing nothing strange about it, that is totally normal as eating or going to bed for sleep. It would be, as we say, very interesting to hear more or to read more about your thoughts on that. So yeah, pornography has become a big part of our life, and we can see that, let's say, on internet, where it's present a lot nowadays, we see that 1/3 of the whole internet traffic is actually pornography connected. And the pornography, the main pornography web pages have more visitors monthly as Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. So those are huge numbers, and it shows how popular the pornography consumption has become. So here you can see some statistics from Pornhub. That is actually a good thing about them, that they publicize their statistics. And I will not go into details here. I will just want you to read the categories. Let's say to the left, you see the most searched on Pornhub, and you can see the examples that showing us how racist and sexist the pornography is. And as we are in Sweden, we can say that Swedish is highly represented among pornography users. It's one of the biggest pornography consuming countries in the world. And you can see some statistics here as well on Sweden. What is very interesting is that there are different trends in pornography, and there are some things getting more and more popular. If you see the top gaining searches to the right, right down corner, you can, for instance, see VR, which is a virtual reality, and the demand for that is rising rapidly. So there are more and more new trends coming into the industry.
And just talking about what does pornography look like, I can tell you that it's no longer, for instance, Playboy. It's no longer looks just like an image of a woman that's naked. It's changed dramatically, the content and the character. So even though back when there was no such thing as the internet and it was just these pictures, it was still very objectifying, and actually research showed that it had negative effects on consumers. Now, with the rise, with the onset of the internet, these pictures, these videos are available on a 24/7 basis. And if you look at in front of you, it says YouPorn. So basically, there's these tube sites. So they're just like, they kind of have the same interface as YouTube. And so you can have all different categories, hundreds of different categories that often are kind of an interaction between sexism and racism. And again, it takes a second to just click and search, and you'll come to titles such as illegal migrant African girl fucks for food. Like, they're just insanely racist and sexist and problematic. And you may be wondering, how then if these are all free and available, how do they actually gain money? So what these sites do is they actually then have, like Pornhub and YouPorn, they have subscriptions. And because of the number of visitors per day, so for instance, Pornhub has about 60 million visitors per day. If one of every, say, 1,000 visitors actually then subscribes, it still makes their profits worth it. And they also, another way they make money is to then advertise they have both live video chats, we have to pay for it, and then they also often advertise for so-called escort services. And that kind of, we start to see then also the link to prostitution. And when we look at what is the actual content, what is pornography teaching those who consume it? So there's only been a peer-reviewed study on pornography's content done by Bridges and her colleagues in the US. And they looked at the top, I think it was 304 scenes, the kind of highest demand scenes. And what they found was 9 out of 10 scenes had physical violence. And then 50% had some kind of verbal violence. So when you look around the slide, and you see things like words like slap, bitch, and this is just totally normal in today's pornography. Common physical aggression includes things like strangling, choking, gagging, open hand slaps, hand over the mouth, etc. What is more, there's almost no condom use. So when we're again thinking, okay, sexual education, it's clearly misses the mark here. There's no discussion about risks of sexually transmitted infections or pregnancies. And again, like we've brought up, very, very sexist and racist, often interacting. Men as dominating, women as submissive. So, when you look at then what requires for, say, sex education, it is sexual experiences that are free from discrimination, coercion, and violence. And clearly, pornography does not provide this expectation or does not meet these requirements. Yes, and as Meghan said before, the pornography, the way it looks, the way it functions, the format takes, has changed drastically in comparison to what we had 10, 20 years ago. And what happened to the images that we were used to see and consume 10, 20 years ago? Well, they just moved to our everyday life. To our very open, very common everyday life, and became a part of the local music videos, advertisements and commercials, films, and TV series. So now it is surrounding us without us sometimes noticing it or questioning it.
and it influences a lot of influence as adults. It influences our kids, and as you can see here on the examples that we are taking, it is telling us how the women should be, who they belong to, and how the men should be like, how they should behave. So these gives us not only images but also instructions how to live our life and how to behave, how to treat each other. And if we are going back to the mainstream pornography, it is clear now. Okay, I can see here that it's not understandable what we are saying or what I'm saying. Should I repeat it probably? Yeah. Yeah, if you can say in the main chat whether you can hear us or not, it would be very helpful for us to know if we should repeat something. Okay, it's much better now, it's clear now. Okay, great, thank you very much. So now we go back to the mainstream pornography, and as Meghan mentioned already, we are living in the epoch of 3As. So the mainstream pornography is now extremely accessible. If you just type in a porn in Google, you immediately get a huge list of results, which are the most popular pornography web pages and tube sites. And it just takes a couple of clicks, and you are there. It is affordable because, well, most of the time you don't have to pay anything in order to watch it, and then it's also anonymous, and that makes it much easier to use because you know that you are safe. No one knows about you using it.
Mm-hmm. So with these 3As that kind of research uses in mind, we can begin to kind of understand that, well, if it's available constantly 24/7 on mobile phones, computers, etc., when we think about, you know, our current day and age, how many young people have mobile phones and own laptops, we begin to see why it's not at all strange that so many young people are consuming pornography. And there's been research worldwide that has shown that the average age, approximately, that young boys start watching pornography, so actively start seeking out pornography, is about 11 and a half years old. In Sweden, there was a study done by Meghan and Natalia, who I've actually had the privilege of working with. In her study, she found that it was approximately 12 years old. And that is the average, so we know that, you know, half of these children are younger than these ages. And this is literally actively, you know, seeking out pornography. So there's, you can imagine there's children at 5, 6, 7 who are then first exposed to pornography. And so this research also showed, they had a survey among 16-year-old boys and girls in Sweden, and they found that 96% of 16-year-old boys in Sweden watched porn, 70% watched at least once a week, and 11% consumed at least once a day. And what is very interesting is, of these 11%, a third actually admitted that they watch pornography more than they want, which again, one can start to wonder, is there kind of maybe some kind of compulsive consumption of pornography? So a lot of researchers have started to kind of map out how does the pornography affect the brain, talking about, you know, pornography addiction. And although it's not an official addiction, some experts say it's only a matter of time. And regardless, if young people are saying, which they are, if they're saying, you know, I feel like I can't stop, I'm, you know, addicted, then we have to take that obviously very, very seriously. And very alarmingly, actually in that study, none of the children had actually talked to any adults about pornography, and that's a change. And today's pornography presents images of gang rape, of sexual assault, etc., as we went through, as we discussed in the slide about pornography content. And one thing that I need to mention is that in that study about pornography content, it was found that I think it was about 96 or 97% of all targets of aggression were women. And very interestingly enough, almost all reactions were either neutral or positive. And when one thinks about child development, so for instance, social learning theory predicts that we humans learn how to behave based on watching and imitating other people. So, and when actions are rewarded, we consider, okay, that's something that's positive. When they are punished, oh, that's, we shouldn't do that. So when we're thinking about what are the type of messages children are then gaining from pornography, well, it's that, you know, if she at first says no, eventually she'll say yes. So no kind of means yes. For girls, it's that sexual violence is actually something that's enjoyable. So it's really normalizing sexual violence among young people, and it's confirming and reinforcing destructive masculine norms. And therefore, it shouldn't be at all a surprise that we hear, you know, 10-year-old boys calling their classmates, female classmates, things like whore or slut. And of course, in the bigger picture of the Me Too phenomenon, we cannot take this, you know, we need to take this seriously. And considering that pornography consumption, or pornography is children's first and primary source of sexual education. This can, again, not be ignored. And what we see in research is that what they learn in pornography actually then is played out in real life. So research shows that, so for instance, there was a study done among about 4,500 young people throughout Europe between the ages of 14 and 17, and it was found that pornography consumption led to attitudes that promote or trivialize violence against women. And what is more, this study and actually a multitude of other studies show that that increased pornography consumption leads to increased sexual aggression and violence against women. So a lot of people, you know, say, well, we can't really say much about whether pornography causes violence or not, but actually we do have the research that really gives us evidence that that actually is the case. And for instance, there's a report that Unizon has done together with Max Waltman that goes through 50 years of research, and it is very conclusive about that link. And then other results that have shown up in the literature is that pornography consumers are often more critical about either their partner's appearance and body or even their own. And of course, it being our primary source of sexual education, it obviously creates certain expectations, both for the partner and themselves. And so what that does is that a lot of, you know, young girls are actually calling into a lot of, for instance, Unizon's member organized chat lines and saying, you know, my boyfriend asked me to do this and that, and I didn't feel comfortable, but I feel very shameful because I want to be good enough, I want him to desire me. So it's really putting a huge amount of pressure on, particularly young girls, but even young boys, and what should sex look like. It really creates this kind of template that I think is very, very problematic. And one of our colleagues actually said, like, really what pornography does is it creates perpetrators without them even realizing, because what it does is it's, hey, the girl is going to be happy or gain pleasure even if she says no at first. So if I just keep going, if I go over the boundary, she's going to like it in the end. And of course, young people, they want to have healthy, good, enjoyable sexual relationships. So really, pornography is creating our future like perpetrators.
Exactly, and all this research that has been done so far, we can see it reflecting our work in Unizon and our member organization. Here you see, for instance, an example from Unizon's report on pornography and prostitution that Meghan just mentioned. You can see here as well that there is a link that you can present download our report in English. Yeah, what's our organization say is that it's very typical that pornography serves as an inspiring source for violence. So here in the quote, for instance, you can see that at least 70–80% of women say that porn plays violence. And also, what is seen is that the level of violence, the amount of violence are getting bigger. Okay, now I hear that it's very hard to what I say. Is it better now? Okay. Okay, I should probably repeat some things. Rebecca, we're sorry about that. Yes, our webinar is being filmed, so if you miss something because of the bad connection, we can send the recording to you, or it will be available through WWP. Getting back to the experiences from our member organizations, some organizations witness that, or a lot of organizations witness that pornography plays a crucial role as an inspiration source for violence. And what is also evident is that the violence is growing, and the amount and types of violence are also getting worse. Also, what you can see here, at the attempt of reporting this violence to the police does get seriously also problematic. That was the quote from one of Unizon's member organizations. And for those of you who read and understand Swedish, we would strongly recommend to go and check the Instagram account that is called Porrens verklighet, or in English, Realities of Pornography, where mostly women share their experience of violence connected to pornography or inspired by pornography. I will just read one of the quotes here. So I met a guy who wanted me to call him daddy and yelled, "How do you like it now, you fucking whore? Say that my dick is huge," the entire time we had sex. I was so shocked that I didn't say anything until afterwards. I asked him why he said all those things. He told me, all the girls in pornography love to hear things like that. And here we can go back to what Meghan told us before about creating the expectations on ourselves, expectations on our partners. For the guy here, it was obvious that he would get this reaction from his partner, from his girlfriend, because that's what he usually sees in pornography. And that also creates expectations of the girl, even if she didn't like it. It's very hard to know how to behave in this case, and whether you should blame the pornography, you should blame the partner, or you should blame yourself, because you cannot just accept it. Yes, and what we also notice when we talk about pornography is that usually it is understood as the pornography industry, and here we want to point out that pornography has different faces as we see it, and it is much closer to us than we sometimes believe. Because it's not only about women's to violence in pornography. It is so close that, let's say, when we text each other, sometimes we receive the naked pictures, and then it is about sexting. Sexting is being a part of this pornography production, let's say, because the images of naked bodies are produced. Then those images of naked bodies and the films that are produced, they can be distributed on the internet, let's say as a revenge pornography, when let's say a breakup is taking place. The men can just spread the pictures or the videos on the internet, send it to the girlfriend's family or friends, just because he wants revenge. And then there is such issue as grooming growing and taking place right now. And the problem is that a lot of young people are subjected to grooming because you never know who is on the other side of the screen, who you are talking to, who is getting your trust and getting you to do certain things, and whether it's filmed, documented or not. So we see this growing problem with grooming as well, and problem that is common for all the countries, because it's also transnational as well as cyber violence being a major crime that are also tackling, or I don't find the word, but that is affecting young people in a very huge scale. And what is very important for us when we talk about cyber violence, that we don't forget to include pornography in the notions of cyber violence, because sometimes it can be forgotten. We can address other issues, but leave pornography aside. And what we are stressing on that pornography is a very big part of cyber violence and should be addressed accordingly.
Okay, and now we're going to move into a discussion about pornography industry. So now for now we focus more so on consumption, and I just to end off with the consumption part. I just want to say that, of course, historically speaking, we know that women have been subject to extreme amounts of sexual violence. We have been, at a lower status in society, and of course, so pornography doesn't cause everything. It doesn't cause all sexual violence that takes place. But now in our society, we've had so many actions, so many measures taken to promote gender equality, but none of these are really going to have the effect we want unless we deal with, especially children's primaries as pornography. And it is an industry that is solely focused on making profit, and certainly not on promoting sexual health from it. And it is an industry that instead actually exploits vulnerable people to make this profit. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. So, interesting enough, actually in literature there is a discrepancy between how we should actually define pornography. There's a lot of different definitions used. I would say the majority use some kind of definition like this: material intended primarily for the purpose of sexual arousal. But of course, there's different interpretations, and that's actually made comparison more difficult because there's no universal definition. But what's even more interesting is actually looking at where the word pornography actually comes from. And so it comes from the Greek words porno, which means prostituted, and graphine, which means to write, draw, or pose. So actually, if you take the word's root and what it actually means to pose or to show or to promote prostitution. Very interesting. And what we actually see in the pornography industry is it does exactly that. So research has shown that women who end up in the pornography industry come from the exact same background factors as women who end up in prostitution in general. So they come from situations of extreme poverty, childhood sexual abuse. The majority have experienced sexual abuse in their childhood, which again, that related to what I began talking about in the beginning, this trauma really has huge effects over time, and in the end, people can develop what's called kind of a self-destructive behavior, which kind of means that they have this almost internal force driving them into prostitution or pornography. So that factor cannot be what's the word I'm looking for? Cannot be ignored. It's a really, really important factor. And then things like abandonment, homelessness, etc. So really, we're talking about the same population here. And actually, what research also shows is that women in prostitution most often also have experienced being filmed for pornography production. It's these women, that women, it's actually the same population. And the women that were in prostitution, so this study by Melissa done in 2007, she interviewed, I think it was 854 different individuals in prostitution in 9 different countries, a very huge variety of countries. And what she found was that 49% of the women or the individuals in prostitution had been filmed at some point for pornography production. And of those, they had significantly higher symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So what are these symptoms? There's flashbacks, nightmares, dissociation, symptoms that we deal with on a daily basis at Talita among the women we work with. Why that could be the case? Well, in discussions with both women who we have worked with, but also women, within the CAP International Coalition, but also survivors in general, they talk about how pornography is particularly damaging and harmful because what happens is even when they leave prostitution, those films, those pictures of exploitation, of abuse, they can never be removed. So their abuse continues on and on and on. And then looking also at then the kind of other side of the coin, the demand for prostitution. We work really closely with Stockholm Police's prostitution group. So they're a group that arrests sex purchasers and also actually kind of sends or meets a lot of women that are in prostitution, and they tell them often about Talita. And so we receive a lot of our clients from that group. We have a fantastic collaboration. But what they've been noticing, and which is also confirmed by the research, is that younger and younger men are purchasing sex. So men as young as 15, 16, 17, sometimes in groups. And this is not something they saw 10, 15, 20 years ago. So this group actually says they cannot think of any other explanation than the constant, the widespread consumption of online pornography. And what many of these boys kind of displayed were very nonchalant attitudes, like, oh, well, it's just something to do, something cool to try, to test out. And what research also shows is that men who consume pornography are statistically more likely to buy sex than other men. What we talked about earlier with kind of relationships and expectations, that also kind of is related, because often what even women in prostitution report is that the men that come and purchase sex say that, well, I wanted to try these things with my partner, she wasn't willing, so therefore I came and bought sex from you. So obviously there is a very important link here. So both pornography production side and then even pornography consumption it cannot be ignored that there's a link to prostitution in general. And actually some people say that maybe you should call pornography documented prostitution.
Okay, so now let's move to what we actually do here in Sweden, how we work with pornography here. Both Unizon and Talita work with pornography. We do it differently, I would say, but we're complementing each other. So pornography issue was one of the major issues for Unizon for a long time. We, together with another umbrella organization in Sweden called WWP, as well as Swedish Women's Lobby, developed a so-called Porn-Free Manifest, where we formulated certain demands towards governmental bodies, politicians, how to act on pornography. I will just say briefly what the demands are. So first of all, we demand the governmental position on pornography. We had one in Sweden, but it was back in 1983, and
As we mentioned before, the pornography industry, the pornography, like the way of the pornography today has drastically changed. So that's why we need a new commission, and there we need to, we want the government to look and investigate the legislation here, or legislation here in Sweden, and to we can work better on this pornography. For instance, so there the Sex Purchase Act that is present in Sweden can be applied for pornography as well, and how we can legally influence the distribution of pornography images. Then we demand the sex education being a separate subject in school. We demand the pornography-free spaces or environments. For instance, school should be one of these. And just to give you an idea how it looks in Sweden now, in schools, less than or more than half of Swedish schools do not have any filters, do not have any, I would say, control over how pornography is spreading on the control phones, tablets that the children get from schools. So pornography is highly accessible in schools, unfortunately. Then we demand the porn-free stores and hotels and workspaces. That's very important. We have several other demands, but I will not go more in detail on them. As I mentioned, pornography and prostitution report, we launched it during summer 2016. And we can on spreading them. After the webinar is done, we will be sending you the shorts of the pornography and prostitution report. There are just 10 main points summarizing all the research and experiences that we have within Unizon. And also, about 1 year ago, we at Unizon, together with other major actors in Sweden, like other NGOs, research representatives, experts, wrote a debate article about pornography that created the wave of attention to pornography that is still continuing. We, as I say, see or addressing the pornography issue as a major part of the work on violence prevention, and we think that it's simply not effective to not address pornography while working with prevention of violence, while working with people. And a lot of our member organizations do work with young people in schools through different programs and projects. What we did this year was very exciting. We used national focus on pornography that got a lot of attention, and we had Gail Times as a key speaker in this conference. And actually, just 1 week ago, we had the Violence Prevention Week and the conference where we also addressed the issue of pornography a lot. Okay, so what is Talita doing? So apart from our support services that we offer to women and girls who have been exploited in pornography, I think we're the only actor that is officially work specifically to prostitution, pornography, and human trafficking for sexual purposes. Apart from that, we've actually launched our what we call our prevention work, and we coined it WWP and it is financed by Avstånden, what is it called in English? I don't know. This this great kind of public fund that has chosen to kind of back us up, which feels fantastic. And currently in Sweden, basically we have a lot of different initiatives, but within schools, if you don't have a teacher that, for instance, has heard about the issue of pornography or has been educated about it, or otherwise has invited in speakers to come and speak about it, you don't hear, you don't have any, it's not included in such a case at this point. We're working on it. So yeah. Oh, good. So we have a 3-year project, and we on developing evidence-based teaching materials and tools for parents. Oh, okay. We're gonna try and turn off the video so you can hear the audio. So we're developing evidence-based teaching materials and tools for parents, teachers, and other professionals. We've seen that a lot of parents become aware of this issue, but they don't know exactly, okay, how are we going to actually address the classroom? But not only the classroom, but even in other areas like within sports, sport environments, youth leaders, etc. So we want to develop these teaching materials to kind of guide parents, teachers, etc. In those very, very important critical conversations. We also, the ultimate goal is to prevent poor sexual health and combat men's violence against women and children. So basically, by giving young people the knowledge about the harms of pornography, how can it affect me as an individual consumer, how can it affect others by my consumption, we want them to be able to then make informed decisions. And of course, at the same time as encouraging schools to also adopt then filters, etc. So I'll just give you kind of a picture of what this, what our kind of, let's see, project looks like. So this is our idea. So we are going to be, we've just done a huge mapping process. We've looked at research, we've looked at different materials and programs in other countries. There's obviously not that much happening yet, but we've still gained some nice helpful inspiration from certain countries. And then, so this is one of our inputs. We have collaborative partners like Unizon. We have our reference group, so that's consisting of both experts from different fields related to the issue of pornography. And then we're bringing in experts in digital tools, films, and communication. So those are all kind of going into this. Well, our idea is then to form a digital platform where there will be written materials for teachers, parents, youth leaders, counselors, etc. There will be documentary films. We think films are such a great way to really ensure that one's message kind of comes through, and also to be able to share personal stories. And I know a lot of you have seen this film about consent and kind of tea. We think it's a fantastic way to really put the point across, but also in kind of almost a little bit of an amusing way. So we're kind of, that's kind of the idea, to combine maybe some kind of animated film with, for instance, personal stories. And then we know that the majority of children are on their smartphones all the time. They're also on computers in school, and that is where pornography is. So we want to almost be kind of compete with pornography and develop what we call smart IT solutions. So that'll be things like maybe some sort of app or quiz, etc., where young people will not only be able to access this important information, but they'll even be able to come to this digital platform where they can be referenced to different sorts of resources like counselors, organizations that they can call or talk with, etc. And all that, we have this kind of arrow underneath. It says strategic planning. So while we're developing this and then eventually launching, we need to be aware or kind of keep reference to, for instance, different things in society that are also going on. So for instance, in Sweden, what's happening is they're doing an evaluation of sex education currently now. So we have to, based on then what they're going to do with that in the future, also kind of maybe tweak or be able to then offer our knowledge to the future development of sex education. We also have the national digitalization strategy, and then a national strategy to prevent and combat men's violence against women. So these, of course, also give us kind of even more reason or justification for our project. And then finally, Sweden in next month in January, we're launching our gender equality agency. So obviously we are going to, we are hoping that pornography is an issue that they are going to focus on, and Unizon is really pushing for that as well. And hopefully then our project be, you know, a few schools that adopt it, but actually then this knowledge, these resources will spread systematically throughout Sweden. So that's what we're working on now. Thank you very much, Meg. Now we have only 4 minutes left as we see here, and we have some practical recommendations on what you can do even today or tomorrow to start addressing the issue of pornography if you didn't do it before. But what we probably can do now is since we're having our presentation, it will be available for you, so you can read it. You can get access to, for instance, the point 1 that we are mentioning here, Pornland, how porn has hijacked our sexuality. That is a documentary by Gail Bryant. That is very good documentary to watch and then to discuss with your colleague. But anyway, what we would prefer to do now is to get questions from you if you have some, or to have some kind of reflections or probably some comments on what you're already doing if you are addressing the issue of pornography within your work, within your organization. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Okay, and I can just say in the meantime that what Meghan mentioned about the cooperation with the different organizations, for instance, within Unizon, it's very important to do it together, to work on such an issue as pornography is, that creates resistance from different organizations and groups. It's very important to work together with our other organizations and to kind of cover different aspects of the work on pornography, for instance, schools and education, advocacy, technical points of the problem, for instance, different systems in order to introduce a filter on pornography. So now we get a question here from Amina George from WWP. How hopeful are you that your intervention will work? So I think we're hopeful, actually. Just now we have begun to contact schools and we're kind of recruiting different young people to be in a reference group, and we had actually only a little bit of time before we had to kind of have some numbers for this kind of extra application that we did. So we were kind of take the time and we wanted, okay, we'll be able to find 5 schools that would be on board. And actually we had a huge response, and it's almost to the point of we have too many private schools that are, because the interest, the demand is so huge. And I think what's really important is to not just kind of develop this very cookie cutter program, but actually to really have it based on schools kind of prerequisites or preconditions, because obviously each school is very unique. And I think also by addressing different areas, not only school, but even other forums where children are, that will also, I think, help to bring more effects, and especially reaching out to parents who, so that the information, the knowledge that's gained in school can then be reinforced at home. And if anything, parents are the ones that are really crying out for this type of intervention. For instance, there's been a national kind of what would you call it, petition among parents in Sweden that became from kind of a municipality petition to now a national one, and there's so many parents on board that are demanding both sex education be improved, including be in that, but then also to implement filters in schools. So we see a huge response, and that gives us, I think, a lot of hope that it will work. Thanks, Nina, for your question.
I would just say that also Me Too pushed it forward a lot, and here in Sweden we have schools actively including into Me Too campaign. They have hashtags both for school students, for teachers, and for school leaders. So the schools are ready to take an action on that, and they really are open for solutions. They seek for more information and new ways how to address it. So we are also very hopeful. And we have also a question from Lina Piskelnik. Have you gotten any pushback from your work from the porn industry or porn lobbyists? That's a difficult question, and thank you for that. Porn industry, we haven't really got any pushback from pornography industry, probably because the major pornography industry is located in the United States, and they haven't seen what's happening in Sweden yet. Yeah, so we will see. But we get some resistance from different actors or experts in Sweden. Let's say we argue for the necessity of introducing filters in schools and doing school interventions, and some experts, some organizations do not believe in this type of interventions, and they do not believe that filters can be a good way to solve the problem, because that's the way to kind of filter board the filter away the democracy, because a lot of people are talking about the freedom of let's say freedom of speech and free access to internet. So there are those voices, and there are voices, for instance, arguing for there are different kinds of pornography. There is good pornography and there is bad pornography. So we need to focus on the bad pornography and still giving access to the good ones. And we don't see it in the same way, because we see that as we mentioned numbers, the amount of violence within the pornography industry and in the pornography films, we do not see how the good pornography is possible or accessible today. And do you have anything to?
Yeah, because when you think about so say so-called feminist porn, that is often you have to pay for it, and then I don't know if there's any that is actually free. So what we do in our is we actually in our interventions, we focus on the commercial sexual industry, pornography industry, and that is where the free stuff is, and that is ultimately what our children are consuming. So that's kind of an easy argument as well. But I should just add that when it comes to, for instance, parents, we were kind of expecting that, well, there might be a little bit of resistance, but we have been shocked by how our parents are they say, finally, thank you so much. So we have had a very positive reaction there. Yeah, I'll say it if it comes to my mind. But yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, our time is up. It was up 5 minutes ago. So we're very glad that you joined us. You are very welcome to send your questions later on. You have both my email address and Meghan's email address here, so you're very welcome with your questions, reflections, suggestions. if you have some, we are very curious to hear more about how you work with violence prevention, or how you work with pornography, etc. So we would like to thank you for joining us again. It was a pleasure to talk to you about this very important topic. And last thing that we would like to ask you to do is to fill in the feedback